Good morning again. I'm Maurice and it's Friday. I've got another food for thought. I've been thinking this week about faith. I think about it often, but believers are supposed to walk by faith. We all know the scripture. Let me read it to you. 2 Corinthians 5:7. Paul says, "For we walk by faith and not by sight." But you know, it's a very challenging scripture. It's formidable to walk by faith and not by sight. So many believers have never exercised the faith because they're frightened. And so they should be. To put a blindfold on and walk forward is stupid to the natural thinking. Faith to the natural man is impossible, it's frightening, and so it should be. But to the spiritual man, if we trust God, then it should be easy to walk by faith and not by sight. Yet we're told to do this. We're told to walk by faith and not by sight, to trust God. In other words, walk by faith. But let me encourage you, if you're having struggles walking by faith in these perilous times. I'm using an illustration and we'll all understand it because we've all learnt to walk in the natural. And to walk in the natural is not easy. Maybe you can't remember when you first started walking. I certainly can't, but I've observed other people's children and I've had 5 children of my own. So I know that they start crawling. Naturally, you don't have to teach them to crawl. They naturally, from laying on the back, they'll roll over and they'll start to crawl. But you have to encourage them to walk. First you put them at the bars of the cot or the playpen, and then they'll have strong enough legs to stand. But you know, when you take them away from the bars that they're holding on to and turn their back to it and ask them to walk across the room to the mother or the father, it's very frightening for them, and often they'll get down and crawl across, or they'll walk a couple of steps and panic and fall, because you have to learn to walk. So my encouragement to you is, if you can't walk by faith, why not start to crawl? Why not just start? And of course, if you're crawling, there'll be many failures. You shouldn't have failures when you learn to walk by faith. I don't have failures walking because I've learned. I had failures when I was crawling and learning to walk. You know, it's a process, crawling by faith, walking by faith, and it takes time. It includes failures. So, forget about great acts of faith. Not many people do great acts of faith. Very, very rare. People boast about things, and they're not great acts of faith. Not many people open the Red Sea. Not many people walk in a lion's den. But nevertheless, you have to learn. And people don't learn to walk by faith because they've been frightened to crawl and start the process. So start today, and you'll have testimonies of how you were able to negotiate impossible circumstances, that you couldn't see the way ahead because you had the blindfold on. You'll have testimonies of how you're protected from harming yourself because you couldn't see the way ahead, because you've learned to walk by faith. You know, the promise of the kingdom is to those that overcome. And you can't overcome without faith. So if you want to be in the kingdom, you've got to learn to walk by faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So it's not enough to be saved by faith. You need to learn to crawl and then walk by faith. Because you need to overcome, and overcoming is by faith. It's all about faith, this wonderful salvation. It's a life of faith. It's a walk of faith. It's without faith, we've got nothing. So start crawling before you can walk. And don't try and run before you can walk. Well, have a blessed and faith-filled week, and keep thinking.